For 26 years, a man in Nagoya kept paying rent on the apartment where his wife was murdered. Let that sit for a second. He did not live there. He paid every single month for an empty room just so that one bloody footprint the killer left on the floor would never get cleaned away. And this year, in 2025, that footprint finally caught someone. I know exactly how that sounds, so let me just say it plainly. In most places, people run from a house like that. They tear it down, change the number, pave it over, pretend it never happened. But in Japan, sometimes they do the exact opposite. Sometimes they freeze the room and refuse to let time touch it. And that tension, running from a place versus freezing it in place, is the whole video. 11 scenes that shook this country. A supermarket that renamed itself Sunflower and still could not survive its own crime. A mountain hamlet where 30 people fell in a single night. A family home, sealed and standing 25 years after everyone inside it was killed and nobody was ever caught. Some of these places are gone now, paved into parking lots the people standing on them know nothing about. A few are still there, still sealed, still waiting. And by the end, you are going to see why this country cannot decide whether to remember or erase. And honestly, which of those two is worse?
Number 11. Let me finish the story I started, because it is the perfect door into all of this. November of 1999, the Nishi ward of Nagoya. A woman named Namiko Takaba was killed in her second floor apartment. Her 1-year-old son was in the room and was not harmed. The killer left almost nothing behind, except one thing, a single bloody footprint on the floor. And then silence. Months, years, decades. The case went cold. But here is what her husband did, and I honestly cannot get my head around the discipline of it. He kept renting the apartment, he moved out, lived somewhere else, and quietly paid the rent on that empty crime scene, month after month, for 26 years, purely so the footprint and the stains would stay exactly where they were, in case science ever caught up. Think about that, paying every month for a room you cannot bear to walk into, because it is the only place your wife's killer left a mark. And then, in October of 2025, it happened. DNA led police to arrest a woman in her 60s, a former classmate of the husband. She has not been tried yet, so I have to be fair and call this alleged a suspect, not a verdict. But that footprint, the thing he protected for a quarter of a century, outlived every other lead in the case. Hold on to that image, the frozen room, the room somebody refuses to let time touch, because it comes back at number 1, bigger than you can imagine. And that choice, freezing a room versus erasing it, is the thread running through this entire list. If that pool, the real hidden Japan underneath the travel posters, is what you came here for, take 1 second and subscribe, because this channel does not do anything else, it just digs into the rooms the guidebooks skip. Okay? The next scene, nobody preserved, there was no time. Number 10, picture a man walking out of his house before dawn with 2 flashlights strapped to his head, one on each side, so that in the dark he looks like he has horns. And I am not being dramatic for effect, that is a real detail from a real night. May 20th, 1938, a tiny farming hamlet called Kayo, near the town of Tsuyama in Okayama. His name was Mutsuo Toi. He was 21. And here is how that night begins. He cuts the power line. The whole hamlet goes black. Those 2 lights on his head start moving, house to house. Over the next 90 minutes, 30 people are killed, about half of everyone who lived there. Then, as the sun comes up, he climbs a nearby mountain and takes his own life. For decades, this was the worst mass killing by a single person in modern Japanese history, and it burned so deep into the culture that it inspired a famous novel and several films. But here is what actually stays with me, and it is not the night itself, it is the morning after, and every morning since. Toi's own house was sold off to cover his debts for about 50 yen, basically nothing, and the building is long gone, just a marked patch of grass now. But the hamlet is still there, and most of the victims' families never left it. They stayed, for generations, right on the same lanes, under the same hills, a few doors from where their own grandparents were killed. And it was not a clean, private grief either. Survivors told journalists decades later that the whole settlement lived under a low, permanent suspicion that simply being close to it made people quietly wonder about you. So a tiny community that had lost half its people just carried that weight between them, side by side, year after year. Some places you flee. Kaio stayed, it aged, and it held the thing in the space between the houses.
Number 9. Kabukicho in Tokyo is the busiest, brightest nightlife district in the country. A canyon of neon that basically never sleeps. And on the 1st of September 2001, in a narrow building there stuffed with tiny bars and clubs, a fire broke out on a lower floor. 44 people died. It is still one of the deadliest fires in post-war Japan, and investigators came to believe it was set on purpose. But here is the thing that gets me. No one was ever charged. The time limit for charging anyone simply expired, and the case closed, unsolved. 44 lives, and no name attached to any of them. And part of why the death toll was so high is a detail that still makes me angry to read. The emergency stairwell, the one-way out, had been blocked with stored beer crates and lockers. The exit was right there, buried under storage. The burned building stood empty for about 5 years. A black scar in the middle of all that neon, and was finally torn down in 2006. And today, on that exact spot, there is a restaurant. People line up in the same doorway for fried chicken, laughing, checking their phones, with no idea what the ground under their feet used to be. Remember that one. Nobody was ever caught. I am going to say it twice more before we are done. The next scene is quieter, and even more disputed. Number 8. A village meeting, spring of 1961, a hamlet called Kuzuo up in the hills of Mae. The men and women of the settlement gather in the local community hall for an event, and there is wine. Except the wine set out for the women has been laced with a farming pesticide. 5 women die, 12 more fall ill, and all of this happens in one room in front of everyone, among people who had known each other their entire lives. A local man, Masaru Okunishi, confessed, then took it straight back, and what followed is one of the most argued over convictions in Japanese history. Acquitted, then sentenced to death on appeal, and he spent the rest of his life, more than 40 years, fighting to reopen the case from a prison cell. He died in there in 2015, at 89, still insisting he was innocent. The hall itself is gone now, but the hamlet closed around the wound like a fist. And this is the part that unsettles me most, more than the poison, honestly. In a place that small, nearly everyone was related, one way or another, to either a victim or the accused. So the silence was never really about protecting a killer. It was about protecting each other. Because there was no line you could draw through that village that did not cut straight through a family. A documentary years later found people there still would not talk about it, in a hamlet that is slowly dying out anyway. The next one I have to handle gently, and I will tell you exactly why. Number 7. I am going to keep this one short and plain on purpose because it involves a family with young children and I am not going to build suspense out of them. That is a line I will not cross. June of 2003, the Maidashi neighborhood of Fukuoka. An entire family of 4 was killed in their home during a robbery by 3 men. The bodies were taken out to Hakata Bay. And the single detail I cannot get past, the one that tells you everything about how senseless it was, is the amount of money that changed hands. The robbery netted about $250. A whole family, for the price of a night out. I read that figure and just sat there for a minute. The case was solved. 1 man was executed in Japan, another in China, a third given life. And let me be clear, because this channel does not deal in it, the nationality of those men is not the story, and I am not going to let it become one. The house is gone, demolished, and the lot where that family lived is now, of all the mundane things, a car park. People reverse into the space without a single thought. The next scene, they refuse to erase. They built the grief right into the walls instead. Number 6. June of 2001, a man walked into an elementary school in the city of Ikeda in Osaka, and in a few terrible minutes, 8 young children were killed, and many more were hurt. And I am not going to describe it. There is nothing in the how of it you need from me, and everything in the after. He was arrested, tried, and executed unusually fast for Japan, within about 3 years. What I actually want to show you is what the school did next, because it is the complete opposite of a car park. They did not knock the building down. They kept part of it deliberately and turned that structure into a memorial woven right into the school, so the place could never quietly forget. Then they rebuilt the rest into what people in Japan now call a fortress school. 1 single entrance, high fences, cameras down every hall, emergency buttons in the classrooms. A whole national conversation about how you keep children safe came out of that one building. And on the grounds there's a tower engraved with the names of the 8. And every year on the day, the school holds a gathering of prayer and pledge. Children study there right now, learning their lessons, a wall away from a memorial to children who were their exact age. That is a heavy place to stand in, and I felt it just reading about it. So the next one, I'm going to do something different. I need to lift us up for a minute, and I promise there is a reason. Number 5. Okay, we have been walking through locked rooms and burned buildings and the names of dead children, this whole list. And I'm going to break the pattern right here on purpose because this place earned a different feeling. At the foot of Mount Fuji in Yamanashi, there is a public park, flagstone paths, a little gazebo looking straight out at the mountain, flower beds, marigolds in the warmer months. Families come, kids run around. It is, and I mean this, truly lovely, and that is exactly the point of it, because this ground used to hold the compound of the Doomsday Cult that released poison gas on the Tokyo subway in 1995. Their building stood right here. And inside that compound, a member who tried to leave was killed on the leader's orders. 1 death among all the harm that group did to Japan. When it was finally all over and the cult collapsed, the buildings were torn down and the local village did something I find quietly beautiful. They planted a park on top of it. They grew marigolds over the footprint of the worst thing that ever happened to them. There is 1 small memorial stone in a corner for the man who was killed inside. And the village itself, the place name that sat on all those police reports, later vanished from the map in a merger. So even the address is gone now. It is the one spot on this whole list where erasing did not feel like denial. It felt like healing. And then I remember why they needed to heal, and the marigolds get a little heavier in my hand. Back to the dark now, cause number 4 is a wound the whole country got wrong. Number 4, summer of 1966, Shizuoka. An executive at a miso company, his wife, and their 2 teenage children were killed in their home, and the house was set on fire. An employee named Iwao Hakamada, a former professional boxer, was arrested, questioned for days, and convicted largely on a confession he said immediately had been beaten out of him. He was sentenced to death. And then he waited. He waited on death row for 48 years, which is, as far as anyone knows, the longest any human being anywhere has ever waited to be executed. 48 years. Sit with that number, because I keep trying to picture it and I cannot. And here is what tips this from a tragedy into something worse. In 2024, a court finally reopened the case and acquitted him, finding the key evidence against him had almost certainly been fabricated. The clothes said to prove his guilt had surfaced in a miso tank more than a year after the fire, and his supporters proved by soaking cloth in miso themselves that the bloodstains were far too red to have sat there that long. So he walked free, an old man, his mind broken by decades in a cell, counting down to a death that kept not coming, cared for by his sister who never once stopped fighting for him. And this is the part everybody forgets in the relief. If Hakamada did not kill that family, then somebody else did, 60 years ago, and was never caught. The house itself burned down that night. The land was later divided into building plots, and ordinary families live there now, right over the footprint of a murder that officially has no killer. Number 3 is a village that read the warning for years and did nothing. Number 3. On the door of a house in a tiny mountain hamlet in Yamaguchi, there was a handwritten sign. It read, more or less setting fires, delighting in the smoke, country bumpkins. And it hung there, in plain view, for a long time before anything happened. The man who wrote it was Kosei Homi, and through a worsening delusion he had come to believe, his handful of elderly neighbors were whispering about him, tormenting him. The hamlet had about 12 people left in it, the last holdouts of a place the modern world had quietly drained away. And on a night in July of 2013, Homi killed 5 of those neighbors, people in their 70s and 80s, and set fire to 2 of the houses. He was caught, and the courts, after weighing his mental state, sentenced him to death. For years, the whole village read that little mock poem by his door and understood on some level that it was a threat. And the machinery of a dying hamlet, too small, too old, too used to keeping the peace, just quietly absorbed it. Until the night it came true, exactly as written. A best-selling book later took its title from the local word for setting fires. And the villagers who were left had to live through years of strangers driving in just to gawk at them. Last films made up there, the hamlet is still clinging on, smaller every year, 2 to go, and number 2 took 3 lives and gave back not one single answer. Number 2, closing time at a supermarket in Hachioji, on the western edge of Tokyo, a July night in 1995. Up in the second floor office, 3 of the staff are counting up, finishing paperwork, the way you do at the end of a shift. One is a woman in her late 40s. The other 2 are high school girls, 16 and 17, working a part-time job. All 3 were tied up, all 3 were shot, and nothing was stolen. The safe was left untouched. To this day, it is the most infamous unsolved shooting in modern Japan, and the police still keep the file open, still hand out flyers on the anniversary. Now watch what happens to the building, because it is its own quiet tragedy. The supermarket tried to reopen. It even changed its name to Himawari, which means sunflower, about the brightest, most hopeful word you could reach for. And it did not matter. The neighborhood would not walk back through those doors. Sales died, and within a few years the store closed for good, was demolished, and the ground was flattened into an empty parking lot. A business that survived the crime and then died of the fear of it. And that thread I told you to hold, nobody was ever caught at Kabukicho, and now here, 3 lives, no killer. Keep it in your hand for 30 more seconds. Cause before number 1, do me one quick favor and tap that like button. It does more for a small channel like this one than you would ever believe. And then, let me take you to the most famous unsolved house in all of Japan. Number 1, there is a house in the Setagaya ward of Tokyo that stands completely alone in the middle of a cleared field, wrapped in white sheeting, greenery climbing up its sides. Every other building around it is gone. It just stands there, sealed because of what happened inside it on the night of December 30th, 2000. A family of 4, the Miyazawa family, 2 parents and their 2 small children, were killed in their own home. And then the killer does not leave. He stays in that house for hours. He sits down, he opens their freezer and eats their ice cream. He turns on their computer, he rests on the sofa and leaves his clothes there. He bleeds from a wound and leaves that too. He leaves the weapon behind. And then at some point he simply walks out into the morning. Which means that for 25 years now, the police have had his DNA, his fingerprints, thousands of pieces of him, and they have never found him. They know his blood type. They know his shoe size. They even pulled grains of sand out of a bag he left behind and traced them, of all places, to a desert in the American Southwest. Sit with that for a moment. There is a thread running from a sealed house in Tokyo all the way to the sand of the United States, and even that did not end in a name. It is the most studied unsolved murder in the country. And of every single place I have covered on this channel, this is the one I picture when I cannot sleep. That is the payoff of the thread 3 times now. Kabukicho Hachioji. And here, the biggest of them all, no killer. But the reason it is number 1 is the house itself. The land was meant to become part of a park, so every neighboring home was cleared away, and only this one was kept, frozen as evidence. The family opened the inside to reporters a few years back, and the dining table was still set the way it was, and the sofa still held the intruder's clothes, right where he dropped them on the last night of the year 2000. And the victim's mother, elderly now, still stands outside a train station handing out leaflets. Because there is a reward, and there is a killer out there who ate ice cream in her daughter's kitchen and then walked out into the morning. That is the frozen room from the very start of this video, taken to its furthest, saddest end. A whole house. Kept alive against time, waiting for a man who never came back. So here is what all of this leaves me with. And it is not about any single one of these crimes. It is about that choice. The one I asked you to watch for. A country can do 2 things with its worst addresses. It can wipe them, pave them, rename them, and let ordinary life pour back in until nothing on the surface remembers a thing. Or it can do the other thing, freeze the room, refuse to clean the floor, keep paying the rent on its own grief, year after year, long after everyone has told it to move on. And I honestly do not know which one is mercy. Erasing lets the living forget, and lets the dead go unanswered. Freezing keeps the question burning, and makes somebody live right beside it every single day. Maybe that is the real haunting, not a ghost in the hall, just a room a whole country cannot decide whether to bury or to keep. If there is a door like that where you live, the one the neighbors steer their kids around, I want to hear about it. Leave it below, I promise I will read it.